They left a dead puppy at a campout, but a stray cat did the extraordinary. Can an animal's instinct truly comprehend human tragedy? Or was something else driving the orange stray cat who wouldn't leave that poor puppy's side? Just when you think this is a simple story of compassion, a startling detail emerges about what the cat really recognized at that campsite, casting his extraordinary vigil in a shocking new light. Don't miss the full emotional story. Like, subscribe, and listen now to uncover the truth. The late summer air in the Sierra Nevada foothills still held the day's warmth, even as dusk began to paint the undersides of the clouds in shades of bruised purple and soft apricot. Pine Ridge Campground, usually a place of cheerful noise, families laughing, campfire songs, the sizzle of grilling food, felt unnaturally subdued around site number 12. Earlier, it had been loud, too loud, filled with the boisterous energy of youth trying too hard to impress. 3 college-aged kids, Chad, Tiffany, and Kevin, had arrived the day before in a beat-up sedan overflowing with cheap tints, coolers packed mostly with beer, and a tiny, shivering bundle of fluff, a golden retriever puppy, barely 8 weeks old. They'd named him Captain, a grand title for such a small creature, and proceeded to treat him more like a novelty prop than a living being. He was passed around, posed for selfies against the backdrop of towering pines, and offered inappropriate snacks while the trio blasted music and grew progressively louder and less coordinated. Martha Jenkins, whose small weathered cottage sat nestled just beyond the official boundary of the state park, about a half-mile hike through the woods from the main campground loops, had heard them. She often heard the campers, the sounds drifting through the trees, but this group had a particular edge, a carelessness that pricked at her unease. She'd lived here for 40 years, 30 of them with her late husband, George. The woods were her sanctuary, the rhythms of nature her companion since his passing 5 years ago. She knew the difference between joyful celebration and reckless abandon. The puppy, Captain, was overwhelmed. The loud noises, the rough handling, the separation from his mother and littermates, it was all too much. He whimpered constantly, huddled in the flimsy carrier they sometimes remembered to put him in, or stumbled around the dusty campsite on unsteady paws, largely ignored unless someone wanted another photo. That afternoon, as the beer flowed freely and a careless game of frisbee got out of hand, disaster struck. Kevin, making a clumsy lunging catch, tripped backward, his heavy hiking boot landing squarely on the tiny puppy who had wandered too close, seeking warmth or perhaps just attention. There was a sickening yelp, cut short, then silence, broken only by the incessant buzz of insects and the distant cry of a hawk. The music was abruptly cut off. Panic replaced drunken bravado. Tiffany screamed. Chad swore violently. Kevin just stared, horrified, at the small, still form on the ground. It was clear Captain was gone. The fragile life had been extinguished in an instant of thoughtless action. The reality of what they'd done, not just the accidental killing, but the potential consequences, the questions they'd face, crashed down on them. They weren't equipped for responsibility, let alone this kind of tragedy. "What do we do?" Tiffany whispered, tears streaming down her face, smudging her carefully applied makeup. We can't tell anyone," Chad said, his voice tight with fear. "They'll kick us out, maybe call the cops. Animal cruelty or something?" "It was an accident," Kevin choked out, pale and shaking. Try explaining that, Chad retorted bitterly. Look, we pack up, now, quietly, we just leave him. The idea was abhorrent, yet born of pure panic. They couldn't face the ranger, couldn't face explaining their carelessness. So, under the deepening twilight, they frantically stuffed sleeping bags into sacks, collapsed tents with trembling hands, and threw everything haphazardly into the car. The cooler, still half full, was left behind. Empty cans and food wrappers littered the site, and near the cold fire pit, almost hidden by a clump of wild grass, lay the small golden body of Captain. With one last fearful look around, Chad shoved the gear into the trunk, slammed it shut, and jumped into the driver's seat. The sedan rumbled to life, its headlights cutting harsh swathes through the gathering dark as it sped away, kicking up dust, leaving behind a profound silence and a small, tragic secret. But they weren't entirely unobserved. Hidden deep within the underbrush bordering the campsite, a pair of luminous green eyes watched the car depart. A creature of the woods, scarred and savvy, had been drawn by the earlier smells of discarded food. He was a stray cat, a large orange tabby with fur the color of dried autumn leaves and a torn left ear, a testament to battles fought for survival. He was nameless, belonging to no one and nowhere, living on the periphery, sustained by his wits and the occasional careless generosity of campers, or, more reliably, the forest's own larder of mice and unwary birds. He had learned long ago that humans were unpredictable, sources of occasional bounty, but more often, danger. He kept his distance, a phantom flitting through the shadows. He'd watched the loud humans and the small, noisy creature they carried. He'd felt the shift in the air when the sudden silence fell, the sharp spike of fear scent that followed. Now, the humans were gone, leaving behind the lingering aroma of cooked meat, spilled beer, and something else, something still and unsettling. Cautiously, the orange cat crept from the dense cover of the manzanita bushes. The abandoned campsite was a treasure trove of potential scraps. He ignored the overturned cooler for the moment, his attention snagged by that other scent, the one that didn't speak of food, but of ending. His feline senses, honed by a life on the edge, guided him toward the fire pit. And there he found it, the small, soft creature that had made the whimpering sounds. It was motionless, its fur still hinting at the puppy softness that life imparts. The cat circled it warily, nose twitching, taking in the scent of dust, pine needles, and the faint metallic tang of blood near its head. He recognized death. He had seen it before in the woods, a bird fallen from its nest, a squirrel struck by a car on the nearby park road. But this was different. This small creature smelled faintly of the loud humans, yet they had left it behind, discarded, alone. Something flickered in the cat's primal brain, an instinct perhaps distorted by his own solitary existence. He wasn't driven by hunger. The scent held no appeal in that way. He nudged the puppy gently with his nose. There was no response, only the cool stillness of lifelessness. The orange cat sat down a few feet away, his tail curled neatly around his paws. The last sliver of sun dipped below the western ridge, plunging the campsite into deep twilight. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine resin. Instead of scavenging and melting back into the woods as he normally would, the stray cat stayed. He kept a silent, solitary watch over the small, abandoned body, two lonely figures in the encroaching darkness of the Sierra night. He didn't know why. It was just something he had to do. Dawn broke crisp and clear over the Sierras. Sunlight filtered through the canopy of pines and cedars, dappling the forest floor in shifting patterns of gold. The abandoned campsite looked forlorn, littered with the evidence of a hasty departure. Crushed cans, stray wrappers, the forgotten cooler leaking meltwater onto the dusty ground. And near the fire pit, the orange cat remained. He hadn't moved far all night. He dozed fitfully, his senses always alert to the rustle of leaves or the distant snap of a twig. He rose now, stretched languidly, a ripple of muscle under his ginger fur, and took another cautious tour around the still form of the puppy. The scent of death was stronger now, mingling with the morning dew. He gave a low, questioning meow, a soft rumble in his chest directed at the silent shape, but received no answer. His stomach growled. Survival dictated he should scavenge what he could from the cooler and move on. There were mice to hunt, perhaps a careless tourist's dropped sandwich to investigate near the park entrance. Yet he felt an inexplicable pull to stay. He couldn't have articulated it, wouldn't have understood human concepts like injustice or neglect, but the sight of the small, discarded creature resonated with some deep, lonely part of his own stray soul. He knew what it was to be left behind. He settled back down, not directly beside the puppy, but a protective few feet away, facing the direction the humans had fled. He groomed himself meticulously, a ritual of normalcy in an abnormal situation, his rough tongue smoothing his fur, but his eyes constantly scanned the surrounding woods. He was a sentinel, guarding a secret he didn't fully comprehend. Meanwhile, about half a mile away, Martha Jenkins began her day. Her small cottage, built by her father decades ago, was filled with the comfortable clutter of a long life lived simply. Handmade quilts, faded photographs, shelves overflowing with books, and windowsills crowded with potted geraniums. She moved with the careful slowness of her 78 years, her joints sometimes stiff in the morning chill, but her spirit remained observant and connected to the world around her. Her routine was invariable. First, coffee, strong and black, brewed in an old percolator that had belonged to her mother. Then she would step out onto her small porch, wrapped in a thick cardigan, and survey her domain. Her property bordered the state park, a buffer of ponderosa pines and oak trees separating her from the main roads and the bustle of the small town further down the mountain. She cherished this proximity to nature, the peace it offered. Today, as she sipped her coffee and listened to the chatter of awakening birds, jays squabbling, the gentle coo of mourning doves, her attention was drawn to an unusual stillness emanating from the direction of the nearby campsites, Site 12 in particular. She'd heard the loud group leave abruptly the night before, the sound of their car engine fading too quickly down the park road. It had struck her as odd. Most campers lingered over breakfast, enjoying the cool morning air. She refilled her mug and decided on her morning walk. It wasn't strenuous, more of a meander along the familiar deer trails that crisscrossed the woods between her cottage and the edge of the official campground. George used to walk with her, pointing out animal tracks or the first wildflowers of spring. Now, the walks were solitary but still comforting, a way to feel close to him and the land they both loved. As she approached the loop containing Site 12, she noticed the mess before she saw the cat. The overflowing trash bin nearby hadn't been used. Instead, litter was scattered around the abandoned campsite like confetti after a sad party. She tutted disapprovingly. Some people had no respect. She made a mental note to mention it to Ranger Dave when she saw him next. Then she saw him, the orange cat. She recognized him instantly. He was one of the semi-feral cats that haunted the edges of the park, usually glimpsed as a fleeting ginger streak disappearing into the undergrowth. She occasionally left out scraps for them on her back porch, though she knew the rangers discouraged it. This one, with the torn ear, was particularly wary. He never let her get close, but today he wasn't fleeing. He was sitting, statue still, near the cold fire pit, staring intently into the trees. His posture wasn't relaxed. It was alert, watchful. Strange, she thought. He should be raiding that cooler or long gone by now. Martha stopped at the edge of the site, partially hidden by a large cedar tree. She watched him for several minutes. He didn't move, except to twitch his good ear towards a sound only he could hear. He seemed fixed, anchored to that spot. It wasn't normal stray behavior. They were always on the move, always cautious, always looking for the next opportunity or the nearest escape route. Curiosity piqued, she took a tentative step forward. "Hello there, kitty," she called softly. The cat's head snapped around, green eyes instantly locking onto her. He didn't bolt, which surprised her. Instead, he let out a distinct, low-pitched meow. It wasn't a greeting, nor was it the typical demanding cry for food. It sounded almost like a warning, or perhaps a plea. He shifted his weight, glancing from Martha back towards the spot near the fire pit, then back to Martha again. Another meow, this one slightly more insistent. Martha frowned. What was he trying to tell her? Animals, she knew, had their own ways of communicating, often more direct than humans realized. George had always said you just had to learn to listen with more than your ears. This cat was definitely trying to convey something. His gaze kept darting towards that patch of ground. She took another slow step into the campsite. The cat stood up, puffing his fur slightly, making himself look bigger. He backed away at a pace but didn't run. He just watched her, his strange vocalizations continuing, a low, guttural sound now. It wasn't aggressive, more urgent. Her eyes followed the direction of his intense focus. At first, she saw nothing but dusty ground and a few clumps of weeds near the stones of the fire ring. Then, her gaze sharpened. She saw a patch of lighter-colored fur, partially obscured by grass. It looked soft. Too soft. A cold dread began to creep up her spine. She thought of the loud youngsters, their abrupt departure. What had they left behind? Slowly, carefully, she walked towards the spot the cat seemed determined to show her. The orange tabby retreated further, but kept up his insistent meowing, his eyes never leaving her, urging her forward. The smell hit her then, faint but distinct beneath the scents of pine and dust, the smell of death. Her breath hitched. She rounded the fire pit, her gaze fixed on that patch of pale fur. And then she saw it clearly. Lying still and small, curled as if sleeping, was the puppy. The little golden retriever she hadn't seen, but had vaguely registered as part of the camper's noisy arrival. Its fur was dusty, its eyes closed, a dark matted patch near its temple, telling a grim story. It was undeniably lifeless. Martha gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears sprang to her eyes, tears of shock, pity, and a sudden, fierce anger. "Oh, you poor little thing," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Oh, those awful, awful people." She looked from the dead puppy to the orange cat, who had fallen silent now, watching her reaction with an unnerving intensity. He had stayed here. He had guarded this small body. He had deliberately drawn her attention to it. A stray cat, hardened by a life of neglect, had shown more compassion, more sense of duty than the humans responsible. The extraordinary nature of his actions struck her profoundly. This wasn't just about finding food or shelter. This was something else, something that spoke to a connection deeper than species. He had recognized a wrongness and had done the only thing he could, bear witness and alert the first person who might understand. Martha stood there for a long moment, the beauty of the morning shattered by the small tragedy at her feet and the quiet dignity of the stray cat watching from the edge of the clearing. The silence felt heavy now, broken only by the distant drone of a plane high overhead and the thumping of her own heart. She knew what she had to do next. She turned, her movements stiff with sorrow and resolve, and started the walk back towards her cottage. The image of the little golden puppy and the steadfast orange cat burned into her mind. She needed to call Ranger Dave. The walk back to her cottage felt longer than usual. Martha's mind raced, replaying the scene. The littered campsite, the still puppy, the unwavering gaze of the orange cat. Each step crunched on the pine needle-strewn path, echoing the disquiet in her heart. Reaching her porch, she bypassed her usual habit of pausing to admire her geraniums and went straight inside to the old rotary phone resting on a small table in the hallway. Her fingers, usually nimble from years of knitting and gardening, fumbled slightly as she dialed the number for the park ranger station, a number she thankfully knew by heart. Pine Ridge Ranger Station, Ranger Miller speaking. The voice on the other end was young and efficient. "Hello, this is Martha Jenkins," she said, her voice steadier now, fueled by indignation. "I live adjacent to the park, off the old logging trail. I need to speak with Ranger Dave, please. It's rather urgent." She knew Dave Peterson well. He'd been the senior ranger here for nearly 20 years, a steady, reliable presence. "Ranger Peterson is out on patrol, Mrs. Jenkins. Is there something I can help you with?" Martha took a deep breath. "I was walking near the campground loops this morning, near Site 12 on the Ponderosa Loop. The campers who were there left suddenly last night, left a terrible mess, and they left something else behind." Her voice caught slightly. "They left a dead puppy." There was a pause on the other end. "A dead puppy, ma'am?" "Yes, a little golden retriever. It looks like, well, it doesn't look like it died naturally. And there's a stray cat there, an orange one. He led me to it. He wouldn't leave the spot." She knew how strange it might sound, but it was the truth. "Okay, Mrs. Jenkins," Ranger Miller said, his tone becoming more serious. "Site 12, Ponderosa Loop. Thank you for reporting this. I'll radio Ranger Peterson immediately and have him head over there. Can you confirm your exact location in case he needs to speak with you?" Martha confirmed her address and hung up, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over her. She sank into her worn armchair, the one George used to favor, and stared out the window at the familiar trees, their tranquility now feeling disturbed. The image of the puppy, so small and helpless, wouldn't leave her mind. And tangled with that image was the steady presence of the orange cat. his silent vigil a stark contrast to the human carelessness that had caused this. It wasn't long before she heard the rumble of a Park Service truck approaching on the gravel access road that skirted her property. Ranger Dave Peterson pulled up near her gate, his familiar weathered face etched with concern. He was a tall man, sturdy, with kind eyes, set under a perpetually furrowed brow, a testament to years of dealing with both the wonders and the problems the park presented. "Morning, Martha," he said, tipping his hat as he walked up her path. "Miller radioed me. Said you found something unpleasant over at Site 12. "Dave," she nodded, relief washing over her at his familiar presence. "It's awful, just awful. They left him there like trash." "The puppy?" "Yes, and the mess they left. But the puppy?" She recounted the story again, the loud campers, their sudden departure, her walk, finding the orange cat behaving strangely, his insistence, and the sad discovery. She emphasized the cat's role, how he seemed determined to make her see. Dave listened patiently, his expression growing grim. "The orange tabby with the torn ear? Yeah, I know the one. Keeps to himself mostly. Never heard of him doing anything like that before?" He shook his head. "People can be disappointing. Leaving a mess is bad enough, but abandoning a dead animal, especially one that was likely in their care. Can you tell how?" Martha couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence. "I'll take a look," Dave said gently. "Standard procedure. We need to document it, try to figure out what happened, and arrange for removal." He sighed. "We also got a registration plate from their check-in. We'll be following up with them. Leaving trash and abandoning a site is a violation, and depending on what I find with the puppy, there might be more." Will you let me know about the cat?" Martha asked, surprising herself. "He's still there, I think. He seemed so protective." Dave looked at her, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "He probably spooked when I drove up, Martha. Strays usually do, but I'll keep an eye out. Let's head over there, if you feel up to showing me exactly where." Martha agreed, pulling her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. They walked back through the woods together, the silence companionable but heavy. As they neared Site 12, the mess was even more jarring in the full morning light. Dave surveyed the scene, his lips tight. "Yep, they left in a hurry," he muttered, pointing to the abandoned cooler and scattered debris. Martha led him towards the fire pit. The puppy lay exactly as she had found it. Dave knelt beside it, his examination gentle but thorough. Martha turned away, unable to watch closely. "Looks like blunt force trauma to the head," Dave said quietly after a moment. "Consistent with being stepped on or maybe hit by something heavy falling. Poor little guy." He stood up, dusting off his knees. "Definitely wasn't natural causes." Martha scanned the edges of the campsite, searching the undergrowth. "The cat?" "No sign of him," Dave said, his eyes also scanning the perimeter. "Probably hiding. He's smart, that one. Knows to lay low when humans show up, especially in uniform." Dave made notes in a small notebook, took a few pictures with his phone for the official report, and then carefully wrapped the small body in a canvas tarp he retrieved from his truck. The finality of the act made Martha's throat tighten. "I'll take him back to the station," Dave said, his voice subdued. "We'll handle it from there, and I'll get someone up here to clean this mess." He looked at Martha. "Thanks for calling this in and for noticing. Not everyone pays attention the way you do." "It was the cat, Dave," Martha insisted softly. "He's the one who noticed." Dave nodded slowly. "Maybe so, Martha. Maybe so. Animals see more than we give them credit for." He secured the wrapped bundle in his truck and turned back to her. "I'll follow up with those kids. Don't you worry. People need to be accountable." As Dave drove away, the sound of his truck fading, Martha lingered for a moment at the edge of the now truly empty campsite. The sun was higher, the air warmer, but a chill remained. She looked towards the dense woods where the cat had likely vanished. She felt a strange sense of connection to the wary stray, a shared moment of witness. He had done an extraordinary thing, driven by an instinct she couldn't fathom but deeply respected. She turned and walked slowly back towards her cottage, the quiet woods seeming less peaceful than before. The image of the orange cat, sitting sentinel, stayed with her. She found herself hoping quite fiercely that he was okay and wondering if she would ever see him again. The encounter had stirred something within her, a flicker of purpose beyond her quiet routine, a connection forged in the shared acknowledgement of a small, sad death. Days turned into a week, then two. The oppressive heat of late summer began to yield to the cooler, crisper air of early autumn. The aspens on the higher slopes started blushing yellow, and the nights grew noticeably colder. Ranger Dave had followed through. The campsite had been cleaned the same day, erasing the physical evidence of the campers' careless stay. He'd later informed Martha discreetly that the young people responsible had been contacted. They'd admitted to the accident, panicked, and faced fines for littering, abandoning the campsite, and improper disposal of an animal, along with a stern lecture about responsibility. It felt like a small consequence for such callousness, but it was something. The official side of things was closed, but for Martha, the encounter lingered. She thought often of the little golden puppy, its life cut short. And even more, she thought of the orange cat. She hadn't seen him since that morning with Ranger Dave. She scanned the woods during her walks, left out a small bowl of dry food and a dish of fresh water on her back porch. Something she did sporadically anyway, but now with a specific, hopeful intention. For days, the food remained untouched, or perhaps visited only by raccoons or unseen creatures in the dead of night. Martha found herself talking aloud to the absent cat sometimes, as she sat on her porch swing in the evenings, wrapped in a shawl. "Where did you go, brave boy?" she'd murmur to the rustling leaves. "Hope you're finding enough to eat out there." Her loneliness, a constant, quiet companion since George's death, felt a little sharper. The cat's act of witness had resonated with her own sense of quiet observation, her feeling of being slightly outside the main flow of life, watching from the periphery. Then, one cool evening, as twilight bled into the sky, she saw a flicker of movement near the woodpile at the edge of her yard. Her breath caught. It was him, the orange tabby, unmistakable with his torn ear and cautious stance. He was watching her house, his green eyes luminous in the fading light. She didn't move, didn't speak, afraid to startle him. He seemed thinner than she remembered, his ginger coat looking a bit dull. Life as a stray, especially as the seasons turned, was undoubtedly hard. He took a hesitant step towards the porch, nose twitching, likely smelling the food she'd left out. He froze, looked directly at her, then retreated slightly, melting back towards the shadows of the trees. Progress. He knew she was there, knew food was available, but trust was a fragile thing, easily broken and hard-earned, especially for an animal used to fending for itself and likely having known human cruelty or neglect. Martha continued her routine. Every evening, she placed a small offering of food and fresh water on the porch. She started sitting outside for longer periods, reading a book or simply watching the sunset, letting the cat grow accustomed to her quiet presence. Sometimes she saw him, a fleeting glimpse at the edge of the woods. Other times, she only knew he'd been there by the emptied food bowl in the morning. One afternoon, while she was tending her small patch of late-blooming chrysanthemums, she saw him emerge from the woods and walk with deliberate slowness towards the porch. He ignored the food bowl this time and instead sat near the steps watching her garden. He was still wary, every muscle tense, ready to bolt, but he didn't run. "Hello there," Martha said softly, not looking directly at him, keeping her movements slow and non-threatening as she snipped a faded bloom. "It's good to see you again. I call you Rusty, you know. Seems to fit that lovely coat of yours." The cat didn't react to the name, of course, but he didn't flinch at her voice either. He simply sat, observing her with those intelligent green eyes. They stayed like that for nearly half an hour, Martha puttering in her garden, Rusty keeping his cautious vigil nearby, a silent understanding slowly building between them in the quiet afternoon air. As the days grew shorter and colder, Rusty's visits became more frequent, more bold. He started eating while Martha was still on the porch, though he kept a careful distance. He'd arrive around dusk, eat quickly, then disappear back into the wood's protective embrace. Martha never tried to touch him, never pushed. She simply provided food, water, and a calm, steady presence. She learned his habits, the way he preferred the dry kibble over the wet food she sometimes offered, the way he meticulously groomed himself after eating, the way his torn ear would twitch at the slightest unexpected sound. One particularly chilly evening, a sharp wind whipping through the pines, Martha found Rusty huddled on the porch mat, trying to shelter from the biting breeze. He looked cold and miserable. Her heart went out to him. "Oh, Rusty," she murmured, opening her door slowly. "It's too cold for you out here tonight." She propped the door open just a crack and went inside, leaving the porch light on. She sat in her armchair where he could see her, pretending to read her book, her heart pounding slightly. Would he dare? Minutes stretched into silence, broken only by the wind whistling around the eaves. Martha held her breath. Then she saw a shadow move in the doorway. Rusty poked his head inside, looked around the warm, lamp-lit living room, his eyes wide. He looked at Martha, then back at the dark, windy outdoors. He took a tentative step inside, then another. He stayed near the door, poised for escape, but he was inside. Martha didn't move a muscle. She kept her gaze lowered to her book, though she wasn't reading a word. She could feel his presence, the slight vibration of his uncertainty. After a long moment, he seemed to make a decision. He walked further into the room, explored the braided rug with cautious steps, sniffed at the leg of a table, and then, astonishingly, jumped onto the vacant armchair opposite Martha's. He curled into a tight ball, tucked his nose under his tail, and closed his eyes, letting out a tiny sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years of hardship. Tears welled in Martha's eyes, but she blinked them back, unwilling to make any sudden movement that might break the spell. The stray cat, The brave sentinel of Site 12 had finally decided to trust her. He had crossed the threshold, not just into her home, but into her life. The quiet cottage felt a little less empty, the silence filled with the soft, rhythmic breathing of a sleeping cat. The careful dance was entering a new phase, one of mutual acceptance, born from a shared moment of witness and the slow, patient offering of kindness. Autumn deepened its hold on the Sierras. The vibrant yellows of the aspens faded to gold, then brown, and the oaks shed their leaves, carpeting the forest floor. Frost laced the mornings with silver, and the scent of wood smoke hung in the crisp air as Martha kept her fireplace fed against the encroaching chill. Inside the cozy cottage, a new rhythm had established itself. Rusty, as Martha now exclusively called him, was no longer just a visitor. He had claimed the armchair opposite hers as his own, spending hours curled up, sleeping the deep, untroubled sleep of an animal that finally feels safe. He still retained much of his wild caution. Loud noises sent him darting under furniture. Strange visitors caused him to vanish until they were gone. But with Martha, he had become remarkably affectionate. The first time he'd tentatively jumped onto her lap as she sat reading by the fire, Martha had felt a profound sense of joy, mixed with a gentle sadness for all the lonely years he must have endured. He kneaded her blanketed legs with his paws, claws carefully retracted, and emitted a rumbling purr that seemed to vibrate through the quiet room. She stroked his soft, thick fur, marveling at the journey he had made from wary stray to trusting companion. His torn ear, once a symbol of hardship, now seemed like a badge of honor, a mark of the survivor he was. He still loved the outdoors and spent hours exploring Martha's yard and the immediate woods, but he always returned. He'd appear at the back door, meowing politely to be let in, bringing with him the scent of pine needles and cold air. He'd often follow Martha around the house, a silent orange shadow, rubbing against her ankles as she prepared her meals or sitting on the windowsill watching her knit. The silence of the cottage was different now. It was punctuated by the soft pad of paws on the wooden floor, the contented purr from the armchair, the occasional demanding meow when his food bowl was deemed insufficiently full. Martha found herself talking to him constantly, sharing anecdotes about her day, memories of George, observations about the changing seasons. Rusty would listen, or seem to, blinking slowly, his green eyes full of a calm wisdom that sometimes felt ancient. One afternoon, looking out the window at the first tentative snowflakes drifting down from a gray sky, Martha reflected on the series of events that had brought Rusty into her life. The carelessness of the young campers, the tragic death of the puppy, the cat's inexplicable vigil. It was a story woven from sadness and neglect. Yet, from that darkness, something unexpectedly beautiful had emerged. Rusty, sensing her quiet mood, jumped onto the windowsill beside her, rubbing his head against her arm. She scratched him behind his good ear, feeling the warmth of his body against the cool glass. "You're a good boy, Rusty," she murmured. "A very good boy. That little puppy, he didn't die entirely in vain, did he? Because of him, you found your way here. And maybe," she added softly, stroking his back, "maybe I found my way back to something too." The loneliness hadn't vanished entirely. Grief, she knew, was a landscape one learned to live within, not conquer, but it had softened. Rusty's presence provided companionship, purpose, and a living, breathing creature to care for. He needed her, and in return, he offered uncomplicated affection and a steady, comforting presence that filled the empty spaces in her days. She thought back to the extraordinary act the prompt mentioned. It wasn't magic, not really. Perhaps it was just a confluence of instinct and circumstance, a cat recognizing death, associating it with the recently departed humans, and reacting with unusual persistence when another human appeared. Perhaps it was driven by his own experiences of abandonment. Whatever the reason, his actions had set in motion a chain of events that led to accountability for the neglectful campers, a measure of dignity for the poor puppy, and ultimately, sanctuary for himself and solace for Martha. The story wasn't just about a cat doing something unusual. It was about the ripple effects of actions, both careless and compassionate. It was about finding connection in unexpected places, about the quiet resilience of both humans and animals, and about the possibility of finding light even after darkness. As winter settled over the Sierra Nevada, blanketing the landscape in deep snow, Martha's cottage became a haven of warmth and peace. The fireplace crackled merrily. The scent of baking bread occasionally filled the air, and curled in his favorite armchair, a formerly stray orange cat purred contentedly, finally home. Martha would often look over at him, this unlikely gift brought to her by a sad circumstance, and feel a profound sense of gratitude. They were two solitary souls who had found comfort and companionship in each other, proving that even in the quiet corners of the world, small acts of kindness and the instincts of a compassionate animal could make an extraordinary difference. The memory of the little golden puppy remained, a poignant reminder of the beginning, but now it was interwoven with the comforting reality of Rusty's presence, a testament to the enduring power of empathy, whether human or feline.
They left a dead puppy at the roadside, but a stray cat did the unthinkable. Why would a hardened stray cat risk everything to stand guard over a dead puppy abandoned on a dangerous highway? His inexplicable loyalty is deeply moving, but the truly shocking twist is how this somber roadside vigil unexpectedly changes the future for both the lonely cat and the compassionate stranger who noticed him. Subscribe, like, and listen to discover the powerful bond forged from tragedy. U.S. Highway 90 slices through the coastal plains of Mississippi like a hurried gray ribbon, flanked on either side by stretches of longleaf pine forest, murky bayous thick with cypress knees, and occasional clearings dotted with weathered houses or rusting mobile homes. It's a road primarily used by locals making short hops between towns like Pascagoula and Ocean Springs, or by truckers hauling goods further east towards Mobile or west towards New Orleans. The shoulder is narrow, often littered with the detritus of travel, shredded tires, discarded fast food wrappers, and sometimes, tragically, the small bodies of animals who misjudged the speed of oncoming vehicles. It was along such a stretch, miles from the nearest town, that a battered blue pickup truck swerved violently onto the gravel shoulder late one humid afternoon. Inside, Mark, barely 20, gripped the steering wheel, his face pale and slick with sweat under the flickering fluorescent lights of a gas station cap. Beside him, Jenna, younger still, sobbed uncontrollably into her hands. In the truck bed, amidst a clutter of empty soda cans and greasy tools, lay the source of their panic. The still, small form of a black Labrador mix puppy, maybe 4 months old, named Buddy. He hadn't been secured properly. Mark had been driving too fast, distracted by Jenna changing the radio station, when a deer had darted out from the pines. He'd swerved hard, sending the unsecured puppy crashing against the side of the truck bed with sickening force. One sharp yelp, then silence. When Mark pulled over minutes later, heart pounding, they found Buddy lifeless, his neck angled unnaturally. Panic, raw and absolute, seized them. They were young, already struggling, the puppy an impulsive acquisition they couldn't really afford. An accident, yes, but explaining it felt impossible. Vet bills they couldn't pay, questions about carelessness, maybe even trouble with the law. Their immature minds, fueled by fear and a profound lack of responsibility, saw only one escape. We can't take him anywhere," Mark stammered, his voice shaking. "What do we do?" Jenna just shook her head, tears streaming. "I don't know. Just leave him?" The words sounded horrific, even to her, but the fear was stronger. So, with furtive, guilty glances at the empty highway, Mark quickly lifted the small, limp body from the truck bed and laid it gently, almost reverently, in the tall grass of the ditch just off the shoulder, partially hidden by a clump of wild indigo. He couldn't bring himself to just toss it. He straightened up, wiped his sweaty hands on his jeans, avoided Jenna's tear-streaked face, and got back behind the wheel. The pickup roared back onto the highway, leaving behind the silent puppy and the heavy weight of their shared, shameful secret. The spot where they left Buddy was unremarkable, just another patch of roadside greenery baking under the relentless Mississippi sun. But it was also part of the territory scavenged by a creature who knew this dangerous borderland well. He was a lean, wary orange tabby cat, scarred from battles over scraps or territory, his bright ginger fur often dusty from the roadside grit. He had no name, no human allegiance. His life was a constant calculation of risk versus reward, darting across the hot asphalt for a discarded morsel, finding shelter from downpours under culverts, avoiding the menacing rush of 18-wheelers. Let's call him Sonny, for the way his fur seemed to catch the light even amidst the grime. Sonny had learned that the edges of the highway were a precarious pantry. He survived on mice and voles rustling in the tall grass, unwary grasshoppers, and the occasional carelessly tossed remnant of a human meal. He knew the sound of slowing cars sometimes meant potential bounty, but more often meant danger. He trusted nothing and no one, relying only on his own sharp senses and quick reflexes. Drawn by the lingering scent of the stopped truck and the faint, disturbing odor of death mingling with the familiar puppy smell, he'd encountered other dogs, usually hostile, near the houses set back from the road. Sonny approached the spot cautiously later that evening, after the sun had dipped below the tree line and the highway traffic had thinned. He moved low through the grass, a silent orange shadow in the twilight. He found the puppy easily. It lay where Mark had placed it, looking almost asleep, except for the unnatural stillness and the faint, wrong scent. Sonny circled the body warily, sniffing. He recognized death. It was a familiar presence in his world. Flattened squirrels, birds fallen victim to cars. He felt no kinship with dogs, usually viewing them as threats. But this one was small, young, and utterly still. There was no menace here, only a profound quietness. Typically, Sonny would have noted the presence, perhaps scavenged if desperate, but ultimately moved on. Survival dictated constant motion, seeking the next meal, the next safe hiding spot. But tonight, something held him there. Perhaps it was the lingering scent of the human's fear clinging to the spot. Perhaps it was the sheer vulnerability of the small form. Or perhaps it was some deeper, inexplicable feline instinct responding to the unnaturalness of the scene. A young creature discarded, alone. Instead of melting back into the woods, Sonny settled down in the tall grass a few feet away from the puppy's body, hidden from the road but close enough to keep watch. He curled into a tight ball, his green eyes scanning the dark surroundings, alert to every sound. The highway hummed nearby, headlights occasionally sweeping the darkness, but Sonny didn't leave. He began a silent, solitary vigil beside the small, abandoned body, an unlikely guardian drawn by forces even he didn't understand. Dawn painted the eastern sky in pale streaks of pink and gray, gradually illuminating the landscape along Highway 90. The air was thick with humidity, promising another sweltering day. Dewdrops clung to the blades of tall grass in the ditch, sparkling briefly before the rising sun began its relentless work. Near the clump of wild indigo, the small form of the Labrador mix puppy lay undisturbed, partially hidden. And beside it, where he had remained throughout the night, sat Sonny. The orange tabby cat had dozed only fitfully. Every passing truck rumble, every distant owl hoot had brought him instantly alert. He rose now, stretching his lean body, muscles stiff from the cool night air. He approached the puppy's body again, sniffing it cautiously. The scent of death was more pronounced now, a heavy, cloying smell beneath the sweetness of the dew-laden grass. He nudged the puppy's flank gently with his nose, perhaps seeking a reaction he knew wouldn't come. The body remained cold and still. A low growl rumbled in Sonny's chest, not of aggression, but of confusion or distress. He looked around, scanning the empty roadside, the silent woods beyond. There was no sign of the creatures who had left this small one behind. No sign of any other animal showing interest. Only him and the still form. Survival instinct warred with this strange new impulse that kept him rooted to the spot. Hunger gnawed at his belly. He should be hunting, patrolling his territory for the morning's scant opportunities. Yet he felt an inexplicable reluctance to leave. He sat down again, closer this time, positioning himself between the puppy and the edge of the road, as if shielding it from the indifferent rush of traffic. He began to groom himself meticulously, a displacement activity perhaps, but also an assertion of presence in this somber space. His rough tongue worked over his dusty orange fur, but his eyes constantly scanned his surroundings, his ears swiveling to catch the faintest sound. It was mid-morning when Sam Harding drove past in his meticulously maintained 20-year-old Ford Ranger. Sam was 75, a retired Marine Corps sergeant major who had found a quiet peace in this rural corner of Mississippi after a lifetime of structure and service elsewhere. His wife Mary had passed away 5 years ago, and his daily routine was simple but rigidly adhered to: morning coffee, tending his vegetable garden, and a mid-morning drive into the nearest town for the newspaper, and maybe a chat with the regulars at the feed store, followed by an afternoon of reading or woodworking. This stretch of Highway 90 was part of his daily route. He knew its landmarks, its potholes, the spots where deer were likely to cross. He drove slowly, observing the world outside his window with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to vigilance. As he approached mile marker 14, near the bend by Hemlock Creek, a flicker of bright orange caught his eye. It was a cat, sitting bolt upright in the tall grass just off the shoulder, startlingly close to the road. Sam frowned slightly. Strays weren't uncommon out here, but they were usually more skittish, darting away from traffic. This one was unusually still, its posture rigid, its attention seemingly fixed on something in the ditch. Sam registered its presence, noted its odd behavior, and drove on, his mind briefly cataloging it alongside the hawk circling overhead and the patch of newly blooming wildflowers near the creek bridge. Just another small detail in the familiar landscape. But something about the cat's stillness lingered in his mind. Most strays Sonny saw were either actively hunting or quickly seeking cover. Sitting exposed like that, so close to the dangerous highway, felt wrong. Later that afternoon, returning from town, Sam approached mile marker 14 again. He glanced towards the spot where he'd seen the orange cat. It was still there, or back again. It hadn't moved more than a few feet, still sitting upright, still staring intently into the ditch grass. Now, this was peculiar. Sam slowed his truck slightly, peering closer. The cat turned its head, its green eyes briefly meeting Sam's gaze before flicking back towards whatever held its attention in the grass. Sam felt a prickle of unease. Animals often behaved strangely around injury or death. Was the cat guarding something? Injured itself? Or maybe there was something else in that ditch. He considered stopping, but the shoulder was narrow here, and traffic was picking up as people headed home from work. He drove on, but the image of the steadfast orange cat stayed with him. He resolved to look again tomorrow. If it was still there, he decided, he would stop. Something wasn't right. Sonny watched the red truck slow down, then drive away. He remained tense, his vigil unbroken. The sun beat down, and the scent of the decaying puppy grew stronger, attracting buzzing flies. Sonny ignored them, focusing on his self-appointed task. He occasionally rose to nudge the small body again, emitting low chirps, before settling back into his watchful pose. The highway traffic roared past, oblivious. The woods behind him rustled with unseen life. But Sonny stayed, a small, determined flame of orange guarding a fading spark in the lonely ditch, bound by an instinct he couldn't name, but refused to abandon. The silent vigil continued under the vast, indifferent Mississippi sky. Another night passed, marked by the rhythmic whoosh of passing trucks and the distant calls of nocturnal animals. Sonny remained anchored to the spot beside the ditch, his small body curled tightly against the damp chill that rose from the earth. He hadn't hunted, hadn't sought shelter beyond the tall grass. His world had shrunk to this small patch of ground. His focus narrowed to the still form beside him and the threatening ribbon of asphalt nearby. When the sun rose again, casting long shadows across the highway, Sonny was awake and alert. The puppy's body was now attracting more insects, and the faint but growing odor of decomposition hung in the humid air. Sonny seemed distressed by this, occasionally batting away flies or nudging the puppy as if trying to wake it from its deepening stillness. He looked thinner now, his orange fur ruffled, his green eyes holding a haunted, weary look. Yet he showed no sign of leaving. Sam Harding set out on his morning drive with a sense of quiet purpose. The image of the orange cat, its strange persistence, had troubled his sleep. He'd told himself it was probably nothing. A cat fixated on a snake hole, maybe guarding a hidden litter, though it seemed the wrong time of year and the wrong behavior for that. Still, the unease lingered. As he approached mile marker 14, he slowed his truck considerably, scanning the roadside ditch. There he was, same spot. The orange cat was sitting upright again, a small, bright sentinel against the green backdrop. He looked tired, Sam thought, but utterly resolute. Sam pulled his truck carefully onto the narrow gravel shoulder about 50 yards past the spot, activating his hazard lights. He sat for a moment, watching the cat in his rearview mirror. The cat turned its head, registered the stopped truck, but didn't bolt. Instead, it looked intently back towards the patch of grass beside it. "All right, fella," Sam murmured to himself, shutting off the engine. "Let's see what's got you so worked up." He opened the truck door slowly, deliberately avoiding any sudden movements that might spook the animal. He was an old man, moving stiffly, and he hoped his non-threatening presence would be apparent. He began walking slowly back along the shoulder towards the cat. Sonny watched the approaching human with wary eyes. His instinct screamed at him to flee, to melt back into the woods as he always did when humans got too close. But another, stronger instinct, the strange protective urge that had kept him here for nearly 2 days, held him fast. He crouched lower in the grass, his body tense, a low growl vibrating in his chest. But he didn't run. He kept his gaze fixed on Sam, then flickered it towards the spot beside him where the puppy lay hidden. Sam stopped about 10 feet away, careful not to loom over the cat. He could smell it now, the unmistakable sickly sweet odor of decay. His heart sank. He knew that smell. "Easy there, Tiger," Sam said softly, his voice calm and low. He wasn't talking to the cat so much as to the tense situation itself. "What have you got there? What are you guarding so fiercely?" He didn't look directly at the cat, instead scanning the area around it. He saw the disturbed grass, the buzzing flies congregating near a particular clump of indigo. Sonny watched his every move, the low growl continuing, but he still didn't flee. It was as if he understood, on some level, that this human's attention was necessary, that the vigil needed to be acknowledged. Sam took another slow step forward, his gaze fixed on the spot Sonny seemed so intent on protecting. The cat shifted, flattening himself further, but held his ground. Sam could see it clearly now. A patch of dark fur partially obscured by weeds, unnaturally still. He didn't need to see more. He knew what he would find. The persistent presence of the cat, its unwavering focus, its distress. It all clicked into place with a grim certainty. "Oh, you poor souls," Sam whispered, his voice filled with sadness. He wasn't just talking about the unseen creature in the grass anymore. He was talking about the fiercely loyal, inexplicably devoted orange cat standing guard. What drove an animal, a wary stray no less, to do such a thing? To stay beside the dead, risking its own safety on this dangerous roadside for nearly 2 days? He stood there for a long moment, the hum of the highway seeming distant, the morning sun feeling suddenly cold. He looked at the cat, truly looked at him, seeing not just a stray but a creature exhibiting a profound, puzzling loyalty. He knew he couldn't just drive away now. He had to intervene. He had to understand. And he had to do something about the small tragedy this persistent orange sentinel had forced him to confront. Sam Harding stood by the roadside, the sounds of passing traffic fading into a dull roar as he contemplated the scene before him. The hidden body in the grass, the buzzing flies, and the steadfast orange cat holding its ground just feet away. His initial sadness was now mingled with a quiet anger at the carelessness or cruelty that led to this, and a profound respect for the small furry creature who had refused to let this death go unnoticed. He knew he needed to report it, though he wasn't sure who the appropriate authority was out here. Sheriff's Department? Animal Control? Highway Patrol? More immediately, he felt a deep need to offer some dignity to the creature hidden in the grass, and to acknowledge the cat's extraordinary vigil. He backed away slowly, speaking softly to the cat. "Okay, Sonny," he murmured, instinctively giving the cat the name that suited his bright coat. "Okay. I understand. You did good. You let me know." Sonny watched him retreat, still tense, but the growling subsided slightly as Sam moved back towards his truck. Sam retrieved his cell phone from the dashboard. He first called the county sheriff's non-emergency line. He explained his location, Highway 90, mile marker 14, and described what he'd found. A deceased puppy, likely abandoned or an accident victim, discovered because a stray cat had been guarding the body for at least 2 days. The dispatcher sounded slightly perplexed by the cat detail, but promised to send a deputy out when one was available, though acknowledging it might take some time given their rural patrol area. They advised him not to touch anything until the deputy arrived. Sam hung up, feeling dissatisfied. Waiting potentially hours felt wrong. The puppy deserved better than to lie here decaying in the ditch. And the cat. Sonny was still there, watching him from the grass, looking exhausted and vulnerable. Sam couldn't just leave him either. He made a decision. Official procedure could wait for the report, but dignity couldn't. He walked back towards the spot, moving slowly, talking calmly to Sonny. "I'm not going to hurt you, fella, or your friend. Just want to take care of things." Sonny allowed Sam to approach closer this time, retreating only a few feet into the thicker brush, where he sat and watched intently. Sam knelt down and gently parted the tall grass. There lay Buddy, the black lab mix puppy. He looked peaceful, almost asleep, but the signs of death and decay were evident. Sam's heart ached for the short, likely difficult life the puppy must have endured, ending here, discarded by the side of the road. He looked over at Sonny, who was watching him with those unwavering green eyes. "You stayed with him," Sam said softly, admiration clear in his voice. "You didn't leave him alone. That counts for something, Cat. That counts for a whole lot." Feeling a resolve to settle over him, Sam went back to his truck. From the toolbox in the bed, he retrieved a small, foldable shovel he kept for emergencies and an old, clean canvas tarp. He returned to the ditch. Sonny watched, alert, but seemingly less agitated now, as if sensing Sam's respectful intentions. Carefully, Sam used the shovel to gently lift the puppy's body onto the tarp. He wrapped the canvas around the small form, creating a makeshift shroud. Then, moving several yards further into the woods, away from the road and the ditch, he found a spot beneath a tall pine tree where the ground was soft with fallen needles. He began to dig, the work slow and steady in the humid air. Sonny followed at a distance, settling under a nearby bush to observe the proceedings. It didn't take long to dig a shallow grave, deep enough to protect the body from scavengers. Sam gently placed the canvas-wrapped bundle into the earth. He stood for a moment, head bowed, murmuring a few quiet words, not a prayer exactly, but an acknowledgement, a farewell. "Rest easy, little fella. You deserved better." Then he carefully filled the grave, tamping the earth down gently, covering the spot with pine needles to make it look undisturbed. When he was finished, he stood up, wiping sweat from his brow. He looked towards the bush where Sonny had been watching. The cat emerged slowly, walked over to the freshly covered grave, sniffed at the disturbed earth, then looked up at Sam. He let out a soft, questioning meow. "He's at peace now, Sonny," Sam said quietly. "Thanks to you." Sam gathered his shovel and tarp. Before heading back to his truck, he took a bottle of water and a small bag of jerky, his own snack, from the cab. He poured some water into a hollow in a large stone near where the puppy had lain, hoping Sonny would find it. He unwrapped a piece of jerky, tore off a small portion, and placed it near the water, knowing cats weren't typically jerky eaters, but it was all he had to offer at that moment. "You should get away from this road, cat," Sam advised, though he knew the animal couldn't understand his words. "It's not safe here." He got back into his truck, started the engine, and glanced back one last time. Sonny was cautiously approaching the water and the piece of jerky. Sam drove away, leaving the cat alone once more, but the encounter had profoundly affected him. The image of the loyal orange cat guarding the deceased puppy, the quiet dignity of the roadside burial, it stirred something deep within him, a mixture of sorrow, respect, and a newfound sense of connection to the small, brave stray he now knew as Sonny. He knew he would be back. The arrival of a county sheriff's deputy later that day was almost anticlimactic. Sam met him back at mile marker 14 and recounted the story. Finding the cat, the discovery of the puppy, his decision to bury it respectfully. The deputy, a young man who looked like he'd seen his share of sad sights on these back roads, listened patiently. He examined the spot where Buddy had lain, noted the tire tracks Mark's panicked swerve had left on the shoulder, and took down Sam's information. If she sat reading in her armchair, he occupied the footstool, often reaching out a paw to rest on her slipper. At night, he no longer just slept at the foot of the bed. He curled up close beside her pillow, his rhythmic purr a soothing lullaby. His aloofness had vanished, replaced by a quiet, unwavering attentiveness. It was as if the crisis had cemented his role not just as a companion but as her devoted guardian. The spot felt different now, imbued with a quiet solemnity. His thoughts, however, turned immediately to Sonny. Where had the cat gone? Had he drunk the water? Eaten the jerky? Most importantly, was he safe? Sam started making daily trips specifically to check on Sonny. On the first day, the water in the stone hollow was gone, though the jerky remained untouched. There was no sign of the cat himself. Sam felt a pang of disappointment, but left fresh water and this time a small container of dry cat food he'd bought at the feed store. He continued this routine for several days. He rarely saw Sonny, catching only fleeting glimpses of orange fur disappearing into the undergrowth, but the food consistently vanished, and fresh water was always welcome. He began talking aloud during his brief stops, leaving the food and water, then stepping back towards his truck. "Just leaving you a little something, Sonny," he'd call out gently towards the woods. "Hope you're doing okay. Staying clear of the road, I hope." Then, about a week after the burial, as Sam was placing the food down, Sonny appeared at the edge of the woods. He didn't run. He sat down, about 20 feet away, and watched Sam with those intelligent green eyes. He looked a little healthier, less gaunt. "Well, hello there," Sam said softly, his heart lifting. "Glad to see you're all right." He finished putting the food down and retreated slowly to his truck as usual. But this time, instead of disappearing, Sonny waited until Sam was back in his truck before cautiously approaching the food and beginning to eat, occasionally glancing towards the vehicle. This became their new routine. Sam would bring food and water, Sonny would appear and wait, then eat after Sam retreated. Gradually, Sonny's waiting distance shortened. He started appearing closer to the road edge when Sam arrived. He allowed Sam to talk to him for longer periods before retreating to eat. Trust, fragile and tentative, was slowly being built across the invisible boundary between wary stray and kind human. One afternoon, Sam decided to wait outside the truck, sitting quietly on the grassy ditch bank some distance from the food. Sonny appeared, hesitated, looked from Sam to the food and back again. After a long moment, he approached the food and ate, acutely aware of Sam's presence but no longer perceiving him as an immediate threat. Progress. Weeks turned into a month, then 2. Summer deepened, the heat becoming thick and oppressive. Sam worried about Sonny finding enough water away from the roadside offering. He started bringing more food, trying different kinds, learning Sonny's preferences. He favored the fish-flavored kibble. Their interactions became the highlight of Sam's day, a quiet ritual of connection. Sonny even began to allow Sam to sit a little closer while he ate. Once, feeling brave, Sam slowly extended a hand. Sonny flinched back initially, but then, astonishingly, leaned forward and briefly rubbed his head against Sam's outstretched fingers before retreating again. Sam felt a thrill of connection, unlike anything he'd felt since Mary passed. This small, scarred survivor, this hero cat, who had shown such profound loyalty to a fallen stranger, was choosing to trust him. The turning point came during a sudden, violent summer thunderstorm. Sam had driven out during a break in the rain to leave food, worried about Sonny. He found the cat huddled miserably under a dripping bush near the usual spot, soaked and trembling. "Oh, Sonny," Sam sighed, "this is no life for you out here in this." On impulse, driven by compassion and the bond they'd slowly forged, Sam opened the passenger door of his truck. He didn't call or coax. He just left the door open, and silent invitation, while he stood back near the food dish. Sonny watched him, then looked at the dark, threatening sky as another rumble of thunder echoed. He looked at the open truck door, a dry, safe space. He seemed to weigh his options, his ingrained caution battling against the misery of the storm and the growing trust he felt for this human. After a long, tense moment, he made his decision. He darted from under the bush, hesitated for only a second, and then leaped gracefully into the cab of the Ford Ranger, settling warily on the passenger floor mat. Sam's breath caught. He moved slowly, carefully closing the door before getting into the driver's seat. Sonny watched him, tense but not panicked. Sam started the engine, the familiar rumble seeming to almost soothe the cat. He drove slowly, carefully, away from mile marker 14, away from the lonely roadside ditch. He drove towards home, towards warmth, safety, and the promise of a shared future. The stray cat, who had guarded the dead, who had survived against all odds, who had slowly, cautiously opened his heart to trust, was finally leaving the dangerous edge of the highway behind. As they drove, Sam glanced over at the orange cat huddled on the floor mat, finally relaxing slightly as the truck moved further from the storm. A quiet understanding passed between them, a bond forged in sorrow, nurtured by patience, and sealed by this leap of faith into a shared haven. The unthinkable vigil had ended, but an unlikely, enduring friendship was just beginning.